I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Today we're going to review an album from a band called Iamamiwhoami. Yes, I got it right!
You've been trying all day.
Man, you guys know that I can't pronounce anything. It's just this, I'm just bumbling idiot. I can't speak. Kin, that's the album title. We're going to review it. How would you describe this band and this album?
Electronic-based beats, synth melodies, and very creepy, mostly high-pitched female vocals.
Yeah.
I would say along the lines of, like, if you're into, you know, like Portishead, Bjork, The Knife, Grimes, stuff like
Grimes
that.
Is a great
because there's some dancier spots, but there's also enough slow spots that it's not like, you know.
Purity Ring.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's, you know, describing this is so hard because she's using a lot of really cool sounds, but something that you kind of pointed out to me, Tom, is that this is a lot. It's very centered on the vocals. The vocals play a huge role in this and really kind of make or break the tracks for me.
Yeah.
I just want to say that this album starts off with a bang.
Oh,
with the track Sever. I thought that track was exceptionally strong and just kind of really sets a good mood, because that's what this album is really all about, is the mood. It's not really about the composition of the songs. It's about creating a very, very definite sound that has a lot of dense electronic melodies and beats that work in. I was interested in the beats. I actually found the beats to be fine and entertaining, but it was more just how they worked with the electronic melodies. You had a lot of repetition, a lot of looping in there, and I really liked that. As far as just construction of the sound, however, there wasn't enough done with it to really keep my interest. How about you?
I understand. I think I did like it a little better than you.
Sure
There was some of that for me, but it wasn't quite as intense. Mostly because this is one of those albums that when I first listened to it, I loved the first 3 tracks, and then it kind of slumped for me. And it still does a little bit, but upon further listens, I found that some of the tracks I didn't like quite so much. I did end up liking better, but there was definitely a limit to it. Once I got to a certain point, the more I listened to it, the more I actually got a little bored with it.
So there's a limit to your love?
Yes. Of Iamamiwhoami.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, I did like it in that regard. I liked it overall. I would definitely recommend this to anyone who thinks that they would like the kind of sound that we've described. But let's jump into more some of the things that we didn't like as much.
Dynamics.
Yes.
Oh man, did this suffer from lack of dynamics? I felt like the songwriting just collapsed under its own weight because there's not enough contrast. You'd reach these choruses and I just didn't do anything. I didn't have any emotional appeal because there was just no change in dynamics. It was all just flatline the entire time. It's just the same, just mezzo forte.
And you had a couple spots where things would like drop out for a split second and come back in, but it wasn't enough.
No.
And those spots, they didn't last long, they didn't develop, it was more just kind of a break. And it's something that electronic music does a lot.
It's totally true. Young, aspiring electronic artists out there, like our friend Ian, who is a frequent visitor and guest and contributor at Velocities in Music. You guys, if you want to make your music engaging, you have to incorporate dynamics. You need your softs to be softer. You need your highs to be louder. You need to have just this giant range between the bottom of how quiet you're going to be and how loud you're going to get it sometimes. And that takes careful consideration of every single track in the mix. You have to make sure every single track is at the right volume for not only in the mix and how everything's mixed together in the general volume, but how they move together. It has to all move in one cohesive movement if you want people to stay involved, because otherwise the tracks come off bland, and a lot of the cool things that you're doing, all this time you're investing into developing the sound, is irrelevant if you don't pay attention to the dynamics, because you're going to lose listeners. And I think it's a subconscious thing, I really do.
Which is kind of a shame, because there is a lot of good songwriting, there's a lot of good melodies. Now, I understand that complaint, and it affected you a little more than it affected me, but I still totally agree that it is there.
It's just something that I really care about, you know?
The big thing to me about this album was that while I like the vocals, I like the electronic backdrops, the beats and melodies, they worked pretty well together. It's not as much that, this is really hard to describe, but generally the deal for me is that I felt like any success that they had together, working together, was kind of accidental. I think that a lot of the weight was on the vocalists, and the reason being, now I don't know how exactly this album was made. I don't know the exact, the way that the people in the group, the duo, worked together, but the way it sounds to me is it sounds like these electronic backdrops and the bulk of the song was made entirely on its own, set in stone, and then the vocals were put on top of it. And I don't like that as much because then you don't have an interaction of the two. Now there is some interacting, but I feel like where it is, it's kind of forced. And now, like I said, I can only assume that that's the way it's done, and maybe that's a little bit of an unfair assumption, but at the same time, think about it in terms of this. We're talking about it from a listener perspective. Jake and I actually had a big conversation the other day about the big differences between artist intention and the way it comes off to a listener. They're two different things, and right now we're talking from terms of the listener. Now, even if they made the album completely different than how I described it, it almost doesn't matter because it sounds that way to me. It comes off, in that regard, if they did take the time to move stuff together and work on making the instrumentals and the vocals work together, then it'd almost be more of a failure because it comes off sounding to me like they didn't do that. And so I would have liked to see a little more interplay between the two, make it sound like they were meshing and really like they were taking the instrumental parts into account more while the vocals were being developed.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even so, I mean, you know, you're building, so if you take your theory of how it was made and then extrapolate on that, I mean, they created the sound. They had this underlying, you know, for lack of a better word, you know, electronic instrumentation base, and then they put vocals on top of it. Well, if you started, and kind of back to my point, if you start with just something that's bland and well composed, but bland at that because it doesn't have enough, you know, spice or dynamics, and then you throw in vocals on top of that, I mean, the vocals don't have a lot to play off of as well. So you just get into this negative cycle that is just this thing. You have to attack the problem at the root, and I think so. I think we have multiple issues going on here, but other than that, this is actually a really solid album.
You know, I made it sound like I was ripping on it a lot there. I still enjoyed this album quite a bit. That was just my one big complaint. I was keeping it out of like the mid-80s.
And I'm the same way. I feel like there's just a couple really big issues with this, but otherwise I love the approach to the composition of the sound. I love the moods, and I love the vocals approach. Again, I thought the vocals, right along with the songwriting, could have been more boisterous at times, but it just comes down to how can the vocals be louder when nothing else is? I mean,
and I'm looking forward to what this group does in the future, because I think most of the things we've described is something that's pretty characteristic of a debut. Something pretty characteristic of a group that is blooming and kind of settling into their own style and own way of writing songs. And as long as they can develop that further, I think these guys are going to be killer. I think they're going to be great.
I completely agree. Definitely check this one out. Cool album title as well. Kin. I think that's a sweet album title. Now the band name, not so cool on that. I mean, I can't even say it.
And it's in English this time.
Oh man, I know, right? I feel like I did better on Lissandro, and I feel like I did better on that one, right? Anyways, what did you guys think of this album? Have you listened to this artist? And if not, definitely recommend it. Go out and do it. I'm gonna give this, Tom, I'm thinking I'm sitting 72.
I'm going 77. I like 77. This one.
So we're mid-70s on this, which means it's solid. You guys may or may not like it as much as we do, or you might like it a lot more, and we definitely want to hear your opinion. So drop us a note at www.velocitiesandmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesandmusic. Also, just hit us up on Facebook and Twitter. That's where we do a lot of talking with all of our fans. We get to know what you guys are listening to, what music you want to hear us talk about on Velocities and Music, and you guys make a huge part of us, of what we do. So keep the contributions coming because you guys rock. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, moving music critique forward.
More